What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. Welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe. Did you know that 95% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed? That's a really high number. I'd like to get that one down. So if you watch this channel regularly and you are not subscribed already, please consider doing that. It would really help me out a lot. And with that out of the way, let's talk about the LA Clippers and their offseason plans. This is a team that could be in big trouble this offseason, and we already have some bad news on Kawhi Leonard, and that is that he already had surgery to repair a partially torn ACL, which is going to put him out for most of next season, if not all of next season. And that's before even knowing if he's going to be on the Clippers next year, because there's reports out there that say it is not a certainty that he will return to the team. So we'll get to all of that, and we'll talk about the other moves that they can make even without Kawhi, but definitely an interesting situation for the Clippers to be in, given the relatively successful year that they just had. Going all the way to the Western Conference Finals and coming back from a big deficit twice to get there against the Mavericks and the Jazz, and ultimately falling to the Phoenix Suns. So this is a team that they're in an interesting spot. They have a good roster on paper, but obviously very injury prone, as we've seen this year, and we will moving forward. But good roster, not a lot of future picks, uncertainty with Kawhi, all of that adds up to a very, very unique situation. So I think what we need to establish first is that the Clippers have no future draft picks whatsoever. I mean, that's not entirely true. They do have like a few of their future, second round picks and first and whatever. But for the most part, they traded pretty much everything to get Kawhi Leonard. It's all locked up in pick swaps and future draft picks going out the window. And they traded everything that they could get to get Paul George and Kawhi, of course. That was the trade. The trade was for PG, but they also, get Kawhi Leonard's commitment to sign along with Paul George being on the team. So getting both of those guys cost them all of their future assets. They don't really have anything. And so if Kawhi Leonard leaves, then they're in a bad spot. And even now, they don't have many tools to upgrade the roster, given the fact that they don't really have any picks to trade. So this is the team that they have. And if Kawhi Leonard does stay, then they're a good team. They have the potential to win the title with this roster. I mean, they were in the conference finals, and if Kawhi was healthy, who knows? Things might have been a different story, right? You can never know for sure. But they were in a good spot this year. Obviously, the bubble was not great for them. They lost in the bubble, and everybody was really ready to bury this team, but I think that there is still some upside with this roster. Of course, this is all assuming that Kawhi Leonard does re-sign and that he's healthy at some point, but they're in a rough spot if he does opt out and leave. And even if he's hurt, if he's hurt this season and misses the whole year, and he's over 30 years old now, and he has a history of lower body injuries and leg injuries and knee injuries, so not a great not a ton of optimism that Kawhi Leonard will be able to age well in his 30s. Like, obviously, when he's on the floor, he'll be good, but the injury stuff is a little bit concerning. So there is quite a big cloud over the future of the Clippers right now, just because of the injury stuff, Kawhi Leonard's free agency, and no future picks. It's going to be an interesting, experiment to see how they navigate this situation, because it's definitely a very unique one. And now let's get into the actual players on this roster. Paul George just signed that big extension last offseason. He's on the hook for 4 more years plus a player option, or the player option is on that 4th year, excuse me. So Paul George is a very good player. I expect him to stay on this team as long as Kawhi's here, which, like I said, who knows how long that's going to be for, but he's going to be the co-star. He's an all-NBA, all-star type player. I know that he hasn't been great in the playoffs at points, over the past couple of years. I thought he had a good playoff run this season, despite a couple of inefficient shooting games. But for the most part, overall, I thought Paul George was very good. Last year, he wasn't, and so there's the whole, pandemic P, playoff P narrative, things like that. He's a good player, and I expect him to stick around on this roster. Kawhi has the player option for $36 million, so he has a couple of different things he can do. He, of course, can opt out and go into free agency, potentially re-sign with the Clippers on a longer-term deal, sign somewhere else. We had the report the other day, I think it was from Mark Stein, that said that Kawhi returning to the Clippers is no longer a certainty, was the actual quote, I believe. So the Mavericks are out there with cap space, so are the Miami Heat. And other teams as well, the New York Knicks, I guess. So we'll see, if Kawhi does test the waters on free agency. Like I said, he's going to be out for most of next year, so you might be getting a player that just doesn't play next season if you do sign him, but, a guy who's won multiple finals and finals MVPs and multiple All-Star appearances, Kawhi Leonard, he's worth it, worth taking a risk. It's just like the KD thing last year, right? I guess that was 2 years ago now, where KD, coming off that Achilles injury, not going to play the whole year. The Nets are perfectly willing to offer him the max contract, and that's the same deal with Kawhi. So we'll see if he does end up leaving. Honestly, at this point, I do think that he's going to stay with Los Angeles. I think it just makes the most sense for him to just remain with the team, whether that is opting in or potentially, just opting out and re-signing. I think there's something where he can get more money if he waits another year. So if he opts into this one, then he can sign for like the 5-year like super max or whatever. So maybe there's some upside to him for waiting a season and rehabbing this year and then signing next off season on a big contract. So I don't know. But he is a good player, and even with the injury stuff, Kawhi is one of the best in the world, and the Clippers should do everything they can to get him back. And then we have all the role players. Aside from those two, obviously Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, I think all these other players on the roster are potential trade guys. They've got, a lot of these guys on middling salaries that could potentially be tossed into trades just to shake things up. I think regardless of whether Kawhi stays or goes, we're going to see the Clippers active on the trade market this offseason, just because, while yes, they were in the conference finals, and potentially if Kawhi doesn't go down, they could have gone even further than that. I think that there is a general need around this team to just maybe make some changes here with specifically players like Patrick Beverley and Rajon Rondo and even Marcus Morris and Serge Ibaka and all these guys. I think that you could justify trading really any of them, just because a lot of these role players, like Beverley, is not as good as he was a couple of years ago, and you have the emergence of Terrence Mann that might be taking some of his minutes away. Ibaka, if he opts in, has been hurt and is getting older. Rondo, of course, is older and kind of lost some minutes in the playoffs and was inconsistent, and so I think you could justify trading a lot of these guys. So even if Kawhi does leave, I think you would definitely want to consider trading these guys just to see what you can get back for them, whether that's picks and you're trying to start some kind of a rebuild, or that is just getting different players in there to try to still be competitive with Paul George as the leader of the team, or if Kawhi does re-sign, then you're just looking at trying to shake up the roster and making it as good as you can for another potential playoff run, assuming that Kawhi is healthy for that playoff run. So Marcus Morris out of this group is probably the hardest to trade just because that contract is not amazing. The 3 more seasons on around $16 million a year is not great for a guy like Morris. He's a good player, but I don't know if he's worth quite that number. He's really become a glorified catch and shoot guy, for the past year or so. He is a really good 3-point shooter. His 3-point numbers have gone up, over the past couple of years of his career, and he was really good from that, from the corner 3 and up top as well, this past season for them. But I don't know if he gives you that much else to really justify $15 million over 3 seasons. So we will see on Marcus Morris. I think he could be traded, but honestly, they'll probably hold on to him just because I think he doesn't have much value out there right now. Patrick Beverley, you could package him along with maybe a younger guy on the roster already, or this year's first-round pick, which they do have, or a couple of seconds or whatever, and maybe get something back for him on that expiring contract. I could definitely see them shopping Patrick Beverley around. I think he, out of anybody on this roster, might be the most likely to be traded. Just because maybe the Patrick Beverley experience has kind of run its course in Los Angeles, and they might need to shake things up a little bit with him. Ibaka has the player option for around almost $10 million, $9.7 million. I don't know what he's going to do. I think he'll probably opt in, given that he's coming off of a back injury, and he's, getting over 30 now, and wasn't great this past year for them. He was injured a lot. It wasn't really his fault, but, Ibaka might not get that contract out on the open market right now, so I would expect an opt-in from Serge Ibaka most likely. He could also be a trade guy. I could see another team taking a chance on him fitting better with them than he does with the Clippers. He is a good role player with championship experience, and I think that there's a lot of teams out there that would like to take a chance on Serge Ibaka for around $10 million, so you could get something decent back for him, I think, if you're the Clippers and you feel like you want to make a move there. But again, if he's healthy, then he can be a good player for you, so 50-50 on that one. Rondo, I feel a similar way about him as I do to Ibaka. He's a little bit cheaper. He's a little bit older. Rondo is, going to be 36 next year. And I know that the playoff Rondo thing has become sort of a meme over the last couple of years, and it's been real. He's gotten better in the playoffs for the most part over the past couple of years, especially with the Lakers a few years ago, and then back when he was with the Pelicans, he would consistently turn it up in the postseason. We didn't really see it this year with the Clippers. For whatever reason, he just didn't really get on the court as much and was kind of in and out of the rotation and, you know, got minutes in some series and not in others. So I'm not entirely sure that Rondo still has it. I think that's a little bit of an overpay for him at $7.5 million. I know they didn't give him that contract. They traded for it. It was an okay move at the time, but I'm not sure that he fits on this roster for next year. So I could see him thrown into a trade as well, or even a buyout midseason if he's not in the rotation. I think that there's a chance of him just like, you know, falling out of the rotation entirely, not really playing, and negotiating a buyout and signing somewhere else. I really think that's a possibility, just given the way that he was trending over the last like month or so of the season and into the postseason. I'm not sure that Rondo has a spot on this team next year. You have Zubac and Kennard. Those guys could potentially be assets, depending on how you look at the contracts. Zubac is undoubtedly a good player, and I think that the money that he's on makes sense for a guy like him. I think that's actually a pretty good fair deal for a guy like Zubac and what he provides on the floor. He was good. You know, he's always healthy is the nice thing about him, except for, ironically, the last couple of games of their playoff run. But he had like an Ironman streak going where he played in like, you know, 200 straight games or something crazy like that. So Zubac is really, you know, valuable, I think, to what they do, and he's only 24 years old, so he could be a guy that, you know, other teams see some upside with him, and I would agree with that he does have some upside still, and so if the Clippers are looking to potentially, you know, make an upgrade, maybe trade for a veteran or something like that, you could throw Zubac in a move, and that would be where the value would come from, but with the team option for the following year, I think that the contract is fair for him, and I'd probably want to hold on to Zubac. Luke Kennard is, you know, could be viewed as a positive or a negative asset right now. I'm not entirely sure. It looks like a little bit of an overpay, but I do think that he's going to have a bigger role on this team next year. It was weird. They paid him a lot of money, and then Ty Lue just didn't really play him much for most of the season. He did get minutes, you know, going into the playoffs and late down the stretch of the regular season. So Kennard is a guy who I think still has a chance to be really good and like live up to that contract. I think it's a little too early to call that an overpay for him. So you could view that as a positive asset, you know, a guy on that money, but with the uncertainty, I'm not entirely sure that other teams will see it that way. So he could be a trade guy, he could not be. If I'm the Clippers, I probably hold on to him just because of the shooting upside and the youth on a relatively cheaper deal. I know that it's kind of, you know, 12-13 million a season. Might seem like a lot, but if he does end up panning out, then that could look pretty good in a year or two. So Kennard is a guy who I'm okay holding on to as well. Let's go through some of these veterans quickly. I'll lump them into a couple of different groups. So I have Patrick Patterson and DeMarcus Cousins are both guys that I would not mind seeing back on like 1-year minimums. Patterson's okay. You know, he kind of fell out of the rotation near the end of the year, but he's like fine. He's serviceable as an option off the bench, even if he doesn't have to play a ton. He's at least there for you. And then Boogie Cousins actually showed some flashes in the postseason. I think against Phoenix he played particularly well, and I would not mind seeing him back on another 1-year minimum. It's a low risk, high reward move. Signing a guy like Boogie who, you know, was an All-NBA player a couple of years ago, has dealt with some injuries and some locker room issues, of course, but if he ever regains, you know, 50-60% of his previous form, that could be a real asset for you off the bench. So I would not mind seeing Boogie back on a minimum as well. Patrick Patterson is 50-50. I don't really care either way on him. And then Nicholas Batum and Reggie Jackson are two guys that I think you need to keep. Specifically Reggie Jackson, we know how well he played in the playoffs, especially after Kawhi went down, you know, averaging like almost 20, maybe over 20 points. I don't know. It was a lot for Reggie Jackson and showed that, you know, some of the flashes of what he was doing back when he was with OKC and even Detroit. So Reggie Jackson I think should come back. He earned himself a lot of money with his play during the playoffs this year, so you know, he could get upwards of 8, 9, 10, 12 million dollars a season. Are the Clippers going to pay that? I think they might have to. So we'll see if he comes back, but I wouldn't do a long-term deal for Reggie Jackson, but maybe like, you know, a 2-year contract where he's making around 10, 12 million a season, I think is probably about right for him. And then Nicholas Batum is also a guy who might have earned himself some money. I don't think he's going to get as much as Jackson does, but he could be a mid-level exception guy. You know, I don't think he's going to earn another minimum contract somewhere. I think if he comes back to the Clippers, it'll be for their mid-level exception, if they do have access to, I believe they do. And if he's not back with the Clippers, then it'll be on a mid-level exception somewhere else. So we will see on Batum and Jackson, but I think those two guys are crucial to bring back because they were key parts of this team all regular season and in the playoffs as well. Terrence Mann will surely be back next year after the performance that he had, you know, dropping, what was it, like almost 40 points, like 39, 41 points maybe, against the Jazz in that closeout game 6 there for him. He's really good. You know, it's non-guaranteed for next year. They're going to guarantee that tomorrow. You know, as soon as you can get that done, guarantee that Terrence Mann deal and bring him back for next year. I fully expect him to be back with the team, and I don't think they're going to trade him. He is like the one like really big positive asset on the roster, but he's only 24 years old and still getting better. So Terrence Mann should come back. Daniel Oturu is okay. I'll lump him in with Yogi Ferrell. Yogi Ferrell's is non-guaranteed. Oturu is much younger, so it's kind of two different players, but I would say that neither of them have their spots locked down for the roster next year. They're going to have to compete for it in camp. Oturu at only 21 could be viewed as a positive asset. You know, you throw him into a trade, maybe along with Ibaka, Rondo, Beverly, whoever, and, you know, make up a little bit of value, view him as like same as a second round pick maybe, and you know, you can potentially throw him in, but I don't think he has necessarily secured his roster spot for next year, even though there probably is some upside there. And then Yogi Ferrell's is non-guaranteed, so I don't think that he, you know, he's going to have to compete for it in camp for sure with all the other guys they bring in. And then Amir Coffey and Jay Scrubb on those two-way contracts. Scrubb is only 20 years old, you know, guy with a little bit of potential. I would expect him back, you know, potentially on another two-way contract or on the full roster. And then Amir Coffey is a guy that I actually like quite a bit. I saw him play. He was playing with them in the bubble a little bit more, if I'm not mistaken. He got some minutes when they were in the bubble. I've seen him play in the G League a little bit, and in Summer League I remember seeing him a couple of years ago. So Coffey is a guy that I actually like as a player, and I think that he can potentially find himself in the rotation next year, even more than he already has been. So I think that they should bring back Amir Coffey as well. So I think this is going to be an active offseason for the Clippers. A lot of this is riding on Kawhi Leonard and what he chooses to do. How long he's going to be out, we don't know. You know, like I said, potentially all of next regular season. It's a lot is up in the air for them right now, and I think they are going to make some moves involving, you know, potentially specifically Patrick Beverley, Serge Ibaka, Rajon Rondo, even Marcus Morris, but I think those are the guys that are likely to be on the trade block for them, and I think a couple of them will end up getting traded. And you know, if Kawhi does opt in and come back, then you're fine, and hopefully you can re-sign him next summer, because if he opts in, then he's just going to be a free agent next year. Maybe he opts out and signs on a long-term deal, or he goes somewhere else. I have no idea. It feels like it's kind of up in the air right now, and things could change at any moment. So we'll see on Kawhi Leonard. And I guess the other option is, you know, bringing in a guy like Kyle Lowry via sign and trade. We've heard the rumors about him. You know, you could potentially put together a package for Russell Westbrook if you're really desperate for a point guard, obviously. Or, you know, there's other guys out there, I guess, but they don't have cap space, so not much to work with on that front. But maybe a sign and trade could be a possibility. We will see for that. And they also have the 27th pick, I think it is, 26th, 27th pick, something like that. Late in the first round, you can add another prospect. I would expect them to keep that and draft somebody who they feel like can contribute right away while also still having some upside for the future. There's a lot of good prospects in this year's first round, and so I don't expect them to trade that pick. I don't think they actually can until after they make the selection, just because of the Stepien rule and how they've traded all these picks for Paul George already. So they might have to wait until after they make it and then trade it, but either way, I don't expect them to. I think they'll probably hold on to whoever they pick there. But yeah, I think that's all I have on the Los Angeles Clippers. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Clippers and their plans for the offseason. Is Kawhi Leonard going to come back? I have no idea. Let me know in the comments down below. And if you are not subscribed, please consider doing that, and I would really appreciate that one. And with all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.